Today's lecture marks the inauguration of the Dr. Samuel C. Chu Memorial Lecture Series in East Asian Studies at The Ohio State University. The lecture series was established in honor of Samuel Chu, a long-term member of our faculty, by his widow, who's with us today, Lucy Chu. For those who are not privileged to have known Sam, let me tell you that Sam, of course, was a scholar and a teacher of great renown. He was born in Shanghai in 1929 and well-traveled as a son of a diplomat. Sam emigrated as a young man to the United States with his family. Years later, he remarked, "I value my upbringing in China. I'm very fortunate that by circumstances and by choice, I'm now at home, actually and psychologically in America." Sam had deep ties, of course, to the academy. He earned a BA at Dartmouth College, where he was elected to Phi Beta Kappa, and earned an MA and PhD in history at Columbia. Sam taught history at Bucknell and the University of Pittsburgh from 1958 through 1969. And in 1969, we were very fortunate to recruit Sam to join Ohio State's history faculty, and also to serve as the founding director of our East Asian Studies program. So Sam served a devoted 26 years of outstanding service to Ohio State, retiring as a professor emeritus in 1995. Sam was well known, of course, for his scholarship. He published the monograph Reformer in Modern China, Chang Chen, in 1965, and two co-edited books, Li Hongqiang and China's Early Modernization in 1997, and Madame Chiang Kai-shek and China in 2005, as well as a host of professional and academic articles. Sam was also a very effective administrator. He served as president of the Midwest Conference on Asian Affairs and established, of course, a firm foundation for Ohio State's thriving East Asian Studies program. But beyond the Ivy Tower, Sam had many, many interests. He was an avid supporter of OSU athletics, although Jonathan and I would just comment he wouldn't have been very happy about the last game. But many other cultural programs. He was a devoted husband of some 56 years to Lucy Chu, herself a renowned musician, music teacher, and pioneering innovator of music pedagogy for children. Sam and Lucy raised a delightful family, including daughters Elaine and Laura, and son Jonathan. Sam's death on August 30th, 2013 was a cause of deep sadness, of course, to his family, but it's important to also note it was a source of great sadness to his many friends and colleagues here at Ohio State. The Samuel C. Chu Lecture in East Asian Studies that we're inaugurating today is certainly a fitting testament to Sam's greatness as a professor, a scholar, an administrator, and as a family man. The lecture series will continue for many years to come, and is supported by an endowment fund that's specifically designated for that purpose. That endowment was enabled by a very generous gift from Lucy and her family in Sam's honor. It brings me profound pleasure to express to Lucy and her children, who are all gathered here this afternoon, our deep and our sincere thanks for the gift. And we certainly pledge that Ohio State University and its Department of History will work hard in the years to come to make absolutely certain that we arrange a series of stellar lectures that would make Sam proud and make each of us, as his colleagues, proud. And today is the beginning of that. So now it's my pleasure to turn the program back over to Peter Hahn.
Thank you, Joe, and let me echo Joe's expression of thanks to Lucy and her family for their generosity that has enabled us to establish this remarkable new lecture series. Thank you, Lucy. It's now my distinct privilege to introduce Professor Myron L. Cohen as the inaugural Samuel C. Chu Lecturer. Dr. Cohen is Professor of Anthropology at Columbia University, where he was taught for 48 years, and a faculty associate of the Weatherhead East Asian Institute. He's also a world-renowned scholar of Chinese culture and society, including economic culture, popular religion, family and kinship, and social change. Professor Cohen has published a series of major books, including such monographs as House United, House Divided, The Chinese Family in Taiwan, Columbia University Press, and Kinship, Contract, Community, and State, Anthropological Perspectives on China from Stanford University Press. He's also published numerous edited volumes and a host of articles, reviews, and other scholarly works. Refusing to rest on his well-deserved laurels, Professor Cohen is presently devoted to 3 book projects, all pertaining to the Menong region in southern Taiwan. These esteemed professional credentials easily justify our invitation to Professor Cohen to deliver this momentous lecture. But there's even more. Professor Cohen and the late Professor Sam Chu met when they were both students at Columbia in 1959. Their common interest in China drew them together in a common cause of exploring that magnificent country and its people. In the process, they formed a close friendship that was both personal and professional, and that lingers even to this day. We are indeed doubly privileged to have such an esteemed scholar and a friend of Sam join us today as the inaugural Chu lecturer. Professor Cohen will enlighten us with a paper entitled Late Imperial China from the Bottom Up, What the Historical Anthropology of the Taiwan Community Can Tell Us About China Then and Now. Please join me in welcoming Professor Myron Cohen as the first Samuel C. Chu lecturer in East Asian Studies at Ohio State University.
Delighted and honored to be asked to give this inaugural Samuel C. Chu Memorial Lecture. As has already been mentioned, I knew Sam when he was just finishing his PhD, and I was just beginning my entree into the Chinese aspect of my graduate career. But for several years, we were both circulating in the same academic community, and his was an extremely important but also enjoyable presence. He was a social activist within the area of Chinese studies, and I think his activism at that very early stage of his career, in a sense, was reflected in the later aspects of his career where he kept it up. Starting with his first book, Sam Chu Scholarly Research was importantly concerned with China's modernization, and this is his first book, which is a very important contribution to Chinese social history, Reformer in Modern China by Chang Jian, right? About Chang Jian. Now, Sam was born in Shanghai, and he spent his early years there. In those days, Shanghai was a symbol of Chinese modernity, but also an expression of China's traumatic and lengthy transition from its imperial past to a yet-to-be-achieved full modernity for its population. During Sam Chu's childhood, the Shanghai trolley lines went right through the city and stopped at the edge of rice paddies that were still under Qing dynasty-style cultivation. In China, modernity was partial and painful from a cultural perspective as well. A cosmic outlook shared by the people of China was fractured by the Western impact and has yet to be replaced by alternative shared values. This shared outlook supported by many other links between local communities and the wider society. This sharing of a common culture and involving consciousness of participation in a cosmic arrangement was a mark of being Chinese. More specifically, a mark of being Han-Chinese. Some of the roots of contemporary Chinese identity and modernity derive from this cultural legacy, while others represent China's post-traditional experiences in recent times. Today, I want to go back to the Imperial era and see the makings and implications of the traditional cultural consensus, together with some of the ties that placed local communities within a nationwide cultural, political, and geographic arrangement. I do this by taking an unlikely route. I go from a community in rural Taiwan into the empire of the Qing dynasty, and from there back into modern China and Taiwan. Looking at China and Taiwan today, from most perspectives, it would seem obvious that each has gone its own separate way, with about 120 years having passed since Japan detached Taiwan from the Qing Empire. After Japan's surrender in 1945, a brief, and at least for Taiwan, a very traumatic period of reunion ended 5 years later with the communist victory on mainland China. This did not end Taiwan's trauma, however, which lasted until martial law was lifted in the 1980s. Today, Many characterize China as an emerging power, while Taiwan's earlier period of sustained economic growth placed that island among East Asia's little dragons. But if the emergence of Taiwan and China as major actors in the global economy can in part, I emphasize in part, be traced to common cultural capital, they now remain quite separate entities in terms of their political systems and, most interestingly, in terms of identity. Briefly, with the obsession about identity on Taiwan, countless opinion surveys have been carried out during recent decades, with the overall trend being a steady decline in identity as Chinese, with identity as Taiwanese or both Taiwanese and Chinese increasingly dominant. At the same time, the growing economic ties between both sides of the Taiwan Straits, the proliferation of air traffic, and the flow of tourists in both directions are among developments comprising a contrary trend, and how all this will work out and be resolved remains to be seen. My concern today is to lay out present-day differences so that I can go beyond them and return to the period before 1895, when Taiwan was part of the Qing Empire. Taiwan entered the Qing Empire in 1683, 39 years after the Manchu defeat of the Ming. Movement of Han Chinese from the China mainland to Taiwan had started even earlier before then, and in spite of efforts to constrain immigration, it picked up during Qing rule, with the Han Chinese population reaching about 2.5 million at the time of the Japanese conquest. For about 50 years on and off, I have been researching one of the Han Chinese communities that formed on Taiwan. The community of particular concern today was known as Minong during Qing, and now known as Mainong. I'll show it in a moment. Founded by immigrants largely from the mainland province of Guangdong, they were Hakka, who in Taiwan as a whole constituted a much smaller population than did those Han Chinese coming from Fujian province, especially from the region centering on Zhangzhou and Quanzhou. All right, here is a map of Qing China, the Chinese Empire during Qing. Now, this is Taiwan, and this is the area from which the Han Chinese on the mainland were moving into Taiwan, both in southern Fujian and in Guangdong province. I want to emphasize that all of the Han Chinese immigrants brought their cultures with them, such that it was on the basis of ideas, values, perceptions, skills, and understandings that had developed on mainland China that the migrants dealt with the new circumstances faced in Taiwan. Also, the movement to Taiwan was within the confines of the Qing Empire, so that people were dealing with variants of some of the very institutions that had been of such formative influence on the China mainland. I have spoken of China as an empire, which indeed it was. But for our purposes this afternoon, a distinction has to be made between this empire and what has been called China proper by Westerners, or by the Chinese, the 18 provinces. This China proper is the classical agrarian China of the Han Chinese. It is within an empire whose area during Qing encompassed more territory outside of China proper than within it, even though the proportion of the population that was non-Han and comprised a multitude of different ethnic and cultural groupings was less than 10%. Now, okay, so this is the Chinese Empire. Let me first say that one of the most important bequests of Imperial China to contemporary China is the area of the country. The Chinese Empire was enormous, and this was called Chinese Turkestan, Tibet, Manchuria. Now, this is the one biggie that was lost. This is Outer Mongolia, which had been part of the Chinese Empire, but which was detached by a Russian coup in the 1920s. That might sound a bit familiar. But that's the Chinese Empire. Oops, that's not good. All right. Where is that? Do you have it here? Wait. All right. Oh, I got it. All right. I seem to be losing the. Oh, there it is. Okay. This green area here is what we call China proper, or the 18 provinces. This is agrarian China, the China of the classic civilization of civilizational base of China. This is the China that most people, when most people talk about China, without even realizing it, they're talking about China proper, or the 18 provinces. They're not talking about the Chinese Empire. Then if the discussion turns to minority groups, other things come into play. But this area of China, the green area, the green agrarian China, was that area where the historical continuity of Chinese civilization rested. The boundaries of the large empire, changed through time, and under the Qing, I think it grew to almost its largest extent, excluding, of course, the period of Mongol rule when China was part of an enormous empire. But all through this, you have the agrarian China proper and the institutions of Imperial China, the culture of Imperial China, the philosophy of Imperial China really rests in China proper. And so it's important that we make that distinction, because what happened with the migration of Han Chinese from the mainland to Taiwan was basically the absorption of Taiwan into China proper. Not into the empire, of course, but also into China proper. This means that those cultural and social elements that were characteristic of Imperial China could be seen in Taiwan as well as on the mainland, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay. Among the Han Chinese, there was what can be characterized as a cultural consensus: shared common identity, language, agriculture, institutions. It is this mainland Chinese culture that was brought to Taiwan, and in this mainland Chinese culture, state and society was merged. You're dealing with a culture in which is a total cosmological outlook, an all-embracing outlook, such that the state, or the institutions of the state, are as much a part of this cosmological arrangement as are other aspects of life. So to talk about state-society separation is basically to strip the Chinese imperial state of its cultural valence, which I think is missing the point. Han Chinese saw imperial institutions as components of a total cosmic arrangement in which the individual, and by which I mean the human body, family, society, and the imperial state institutions were all involved and interconnected. Concerning the impact of imperial rule on local society, well, let me just, all right, here, this is Taiwan, obviously, and just to show you now, this is the Meinong area right there where I did my fieldwork, and it's this Meinong area that is the focus of the talk tonight. All right, now, concerning the impact of imperial rule on local society, reference commonly is made to the phrase, heaven is high and the emperor far away. Oops. Heaven is high and the emperor is far away. Now this is said often as part of a larger narrative separating state and society. The centralized rule only to the county level, the imperial bureaucracy did indeed only go to the county level, and a grand distinction between so-called gentry and so-called peasantry. So this is a kind of a state and society narrative in which the two are distinct. However, the meaning of this can be, in fact, turned around totally. As heaven is important and everywhere, so is the emperor. Other popular phrases reflect this other reality, which is the interconnectivity of the whole. So here's this thing. From the emperor to the commoners. The interconnection, this is a very common phrase. This is from the emperor to the commoners. It's all interconnected. All sorts of things, family relations, and a myriad of other factors are seen as going from the emperor to the commoners. Not in terms of a command structure, but in terms of the interconnectivity. And then from the imperial court to the neighborhood alleys. These were phrases that I in fact drew from documents in Meinong, Taiwan, Qing documents. And so that the notion of imperial distance, of imperial separation, is denied by these statements, but it's also denied by a whole series of institutional arrangements that we will be coming to. Having the shared cultural consensus to which I refer, it was molded during the imperial era. Then it was fractured with the impact of the West, starting with the Opium War of 1839. As is well known, The British defeat of China was but the beginning of an ongoing trauma which brought down the imperial system. A later phase of this assault was the Sino-Japanese War, one result of which was that Taiwan was given to Japan in 1895. At the time of this annexation, Taiwan was an extension of China proper, as I've already mentioned, in that the vast majority of its population were descendants of immigrants, or immigrants themselves from across the Taiwan Straits. During most of its time under Qing dynasty control, Taiwan was a prefecture of Fujian province. But in 1895, 10 years before the Japanese occupation, it was given full provincial status. So the 18 provinces became 19 provinces for 10 years, and the Japanese took it. The imperial institutions of China proper were in place in Taiwan. Minong was settled about 160 years before the Japanese conquest. The village called Minong was central to a multi-village alliance of Hakka settlements. The Hakka is one of the languages of southern China, extending somewhat beyond the borders of Minong Township. And these were borders that were later demarcated by the Japanese and maintained by the post-Japanese Chinese government. It's important because the data I'm going to be showing you, since they're based upon government work, they show that administrative district. They don't capture the entire local community arrangement. This alliance was part of a yet larger arrangement encompassing all Hakka settlements in South Taiwan. Minong was the right brigade of what was called the 6th Brigade. This alliance was a militia organization, defensive or expansionistic with respect to the non-Hakka communities to its west, the Hokkien communities, and the Taiwan native settlements, the so-called aborigines in the mountains. So you have a Hakka settlement zone which is organized or framed by a militia organization. The 6th Brigade Alliance framed the community organization of the South Taiwan Hakka. My own interest in the historical anthropology of Minong has been powerfully reinforced by the richness of data pertaining to this area during Qing. This afternoon I want to use one body of data which helps fill out the cosmological orientation held by the people of Minong during the imperial period. We're looking at, we're basically looking at Qing dynasty Weltanschauung, but it's not Weltanschauung, it's Kosmosanschauung. Okay. It might surprise you to hear that these data are derived from a land survey which was undertaken by the Japanese in 1902, less than seven years after they assumed control of Minong. The findings of this survey reflect pre-Japanese circumstances, for at the local level, not much had yet changed, and the survey was undertaken as preliminary to the imposition of important changes in property relations, which are not my concern today. What the Japanese did is interesting enough, but that's for another, that's a different research project. But what bearing on cultural or cosmological issues does a land survey have? Before turning to this question, a few words about the survey itself. Meanings, associations from the 1902 Japanese Cadastral Survey. Well, okay, I will get on to, oh, here we are, all right. Okay, before turning to this question, a few words about the survey itself. This was an island-wide undertaking involving plot-by-plot measurement and registration, with ownership, land type, and other attributes carefully recorded. The Japanese were a conquest movement in Taiwan. There was a colony, and they darn well expressed that. The survey forms for the island as a whole remained intact throughout the period of Japanese control and were kept in storage by the Taiwan government until the mid-1980s, when they were destroyed to make space available for new government files. This was quite a disaster for scholarship. This unbelievable, precious body of data were simply burnt. Fortunately, in the early 1970s, I received permission to copy the land survey records for Minong Township, although many years were to pass before I began to analyze them. In other words, these records are about one of the few surviving remnants of that Japanese population survey. As far as Minong is concerned, the survey recorded and described this 7,243 plots. Here, this is land area, not plots. The survey's aim was to provide full details of ownership, other rights, and land use in terms of existing legal and customary arrangements. In other words, the survey provided a description of what was overwhelmingly Qing period land-owning arrangements, there being only minor changes during the first few years of Japanese rule, with the survey itself undertaken precisely to facilitate the more radical changes which were yet to come. The 1902 cadastral survey classified all land into 9 categories. In economic terms, the most important were wet rice land, followed by dry field. I won't have to read all these numbers here. Basically, wet rice land comprised 43% of all plots and 39% of the total land area of Myron. By the way, this includes not only wet rice and the dry field, but also residential things, wasteland, the works, the entire physical land area, even ponds. Land in other categories amounted to a little more than, dry field amounted to 32% of all plots and 45% of all land. So dry field and wet rice were the major land forms. Of course, it makes sense. It was an agrarian situation. Now, here's where it becomes interesting. I want to talk now about the presence of an interesting form of ownership that this survey reveals, and which is the core of this presentation, because we're talking about associations, not about individual families, but corporate associations as property-owning units. And here we have, okay, so, all right, in terms of all land, the private land was 74%. Ancestral associations, there are 2 kinds, I'll talk about that in a moment, 8%, and other kinds of associations, which is the where is this darn thing? Okay, got it. Other forms of land, the association land is 8%, and other is 9%. Now, if you look at, if you look at wet rice, you get some very interesting different figures. The total private ownership amounted to 74% of all wet rice land. Ancestral associations 8%, and other associations. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong numbers here. All right, get back to wet rice. Wet rice 70% private, 15% ancestral, 14% associate. In other words, the best, most expensive land in Myron, 30% was owned by associations. Okay, so that if you look at the total land ownership, it's not an overwhelming presence. But if you look at the most expensive, valuable land, it's a pretty formidable presence. Now, what was an association? I'll say a few words about that, and then we can move on to the gist of the presentation. A land-owning association was based upon shares, which we bought and sold, albeit with some restrictions. So how does it work? Let's say 10 farmers get together and decide they want to set up some kind of a God-worshipping association. Each farmer contributes $1, and with the $10, they buy a plot of land. And that's the land that belongs not to the farmers, but to the association. The farmers are shareholders in the association. An association had a religious focus, usually spelled out in the introductory part of the association account book. Every association had an account book. An association had a manager who kept records of income and expenses and was individually in charge of association affairs during the year. This is late Imperial China, by the way, and I just want you to think about the diffusion of important managerial responsibilities within the rural population at that time. That's part of the heritage. This managerial capability, this managerial complexity. Different associations had different rules as to managers' terms of duty, be this rotational or long-term. There was an annual meeting of shareholders during which the manager would make an accounting report that would be entered into the association account book. There would be worship of the association's religious focus. I'm being deliberately broad here. And there would be a banquet for shareholders. There were 200 of them, roughly 200 associations in Myron, picked up by the cadastral survey. The cadastral survey shows roughly equal representation of 2 large categories of land and associations. Some associations were dedicated to ancestors. These were known as Chan. These took as a focus remote or near patrilineal ancestors. Some were close Taiwan-born ancestors. Others could be very remote China mainland ancestors. I won't deal with these this afternoon, for it's a subject demanding time of its own. I am dealing with the second category, which comprised what were known as associations, or hui. These were associations that were not based upon kinship, but based upon a common shared ritual or functional focus, as we shall see. I want to deal with corporate groups in this category. There are about 100 involving roughly 50 different religious foci. Taken together, these associations, I'm talking about the hui associations, provide a remarkable map of the cosmic and earthly arrangements that were important to this particular community in late Imperial China. Many features of traditional Chinese religion and religious and social life, often viewed as unconnected to each other, are here shown to contribute to a shared world view. Now, just one moment, I want to show you a few things, now we can get to them. All right, this is an 1890 contract for a family sale of land to an ancestral association. We have the family as a property-owning entity selling land to the association as a property-owning entity. And that's why when the Japanese took their cadastral survey, they said, who owned this? Well, it's the Mazu Association that owns it, not individuals. Okay, so there was this, when I put it, this is late traditional corporate culture. It was absolutely pervasive. Now let's see, what does this say here? All right, okay, so this says here, the person, actually this is, the first clause here says that the party selling this contract is basically three men in one family, and let's see if I can find this thing. Well, this gives lots of boilerplate that's standard in these land transfer contracts, but I'm trying to find. Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay, this is being sold. Oh, sorry about that. This is a very unsteady hand. All right. Anyway, this is being sold to the Lin Ping Shi Ancestral Association, as represented by, and there are several people that are mentioned there. In other words, there are several members of the corporation who come, and they've now. One interesting thing about this contract is it's the only one I've ever seen. I have seen many of them in which you have a footprint on the contract, and that it's obviously the footprint of the seller. Chinese traditional contracts work this way, especially in terms of buying and selling. The seller prepares the contract. The buyer does not sign. The buyer is mentioned within the body of the contract as receiving the land, and the buyer gets the land together with the document. And this is common throughout China. Okay, so here now, the shares were commodities. I'm talking about late Imperial China. The shares were commodities that could be bought and sold. So the notion, that's why, for example, when after the Western powers breached China, and in the 1870s, I think that several steamship companies began to offer shares in China. Western steamship companies, the Chinese bought them up like crazy, like this, because they knew all about it. It was part of their own corporate culture. So at any rate, this says here, Li Chu Tui Hui Ziren, a guy named Lai, and he's selling one share in the Zhong Yun Qingming Association. Okay, he is selling a share to somebody else. So we have also the point of the high degree of commoditization. Now, what I want to all right now here this is an association count book, and this is the introductory section. You'll see the calligraphy is quite good because these are often written by scholars. And here you see the shareholders. This says Meiji 34. This was copied during the Japanese period, but it's a copy of the Qing document. You'll see the shareholders. And this one says that this share was sold at such and such a time to somebody else. And this is an ancestral association, so you only see 2 characters for each person because they all have the same surname. In another association, you'd see 3. Here is one. This is the Taisho, the Japanese. This is Taisho 10. This is 1921 rather. And so it was under Japanese rule, but it's the same, the format was the same as early ones. This happens to be a better copy. Okay, now, I am moving now to the associations, the roll call of the associations, and I'll try to make it such that you're not overwhelmed by millions of Chinese names, but on the other hand, I think certain points have to be made. We're talking now about the associations that were listed in the cadastral survey, and I am grouping them according to some basic themes, and each one of these themes happens to represent major configurations of Chinese culture and the Chinese worldview. So the first is the elite literati focus. This is a farm community, but it doesn't stop them from having a Confucius association. The Gongxiang. Then below that is Wenchang, the god of literature and examinations. Mind you, each one of these is a separate association. I should add one crucial fact. You could belong to as many associations as you could afford to buy shares in. Not that you weren't restricted. So that I could belong to the Confucius Association and to the Earth God Association and to several ancestral associations. And there are people who did belong, had shares in many. They could be bought and sold. So that the association was a corporate entity representing a particular cultural choice within the huge configuration of the Chinese cultural whole. But that corporate choice was not a sectarian choice in the sense you're either this or that. It was rather seeking to focus on one aspect of your total environment. By that logic, you could obviously belong to many of them. In Western society, it'd be rare for someone to belong to a Muslim association, a Jewish association, and a Christian association at the same time. This is not exactly the way things work, but this is a totally different configuration. Okay, so you have Confucius, you have Wenchang, the god of literature examinations. You have Hanyu, the great Tang Dynasty scholar. You have the Great Literature Association. You have and this is the military association, because in China you have both military degree holders and civilian degree holders. And this is this Zhangjiang Association. Zhangjiang was a high-ranking military officer in the Green or Han camp in China. Then you have an association to support the pavilion for honoring the written word, which is an important elite concern, the sacred quality of the word. And then you have an elders literary fund. Many of the members of many of the shareholders of these associations were in fact degree holders. Many were not. Commoners and degree holders interacted, and by placing their associations within the larger rubric of all of Meinong's associations, they were in fact saying we're part of this community. And this tight interrelationship at the local level between elite, which is defined by the imperial state, and commoners is an important characteristic, and one that was forgotten after the empire collapsed, and you had a growing estrangement between Chinese intellectuals and the ordinary people. Well, that wasn't the case in the imperial period. Okay. Now, these are some relics of this scholarship in Meinong. This is the Shuangwei Academy. It's a total wreck now, but this used to be a private academy in Meinong, run by some of the people who also organized the associations. You can see it's now simply used kind of a farm. And this is the scene there, and this is their effort to. This actually is the writing here, although I just did this recently. In fact, is a tablet to Confucius, and you'll see a better one in a moment. This is the Sung family school, and this is a tablet to Confucius, a very elite standard tablet, and it was in every single school in China. You had a tablet to Confucius, and you would worship in that. You would worship in that tablet, and this was all over the place. Now, these tablets to Confucius, by the way, were the exact same format as tablets to the ancestors. This is an ancestral tablet, the same format. In both cases, what you have is the rendering of something corporate and physical. It's made abstract. It's abstracted a bit. Instead of an image, you have a tablet. And there are plenty of images around here too. But the whole point of the tablet is to make it more of an abstract idea. Okay, it's not embodied, in other words. And here you have a modern arrangement of ancestral tablets and answers, just to show you the similarities. Okay, and here's a contemporary ancestral hall. All right, now, this is again another interesting remainder of the Qing legacy. This is the home of a Gongxiang degree holder. The Gongxiang was one of the higher academic degrees awarded by the Imperial examination system, and this plaque is still there, right there in Meinong today. And it was awarded in, what's that, 1860s, 211. Right, and it says on the right side, it was said this tablet was presented by a big officials of Fujian province. At this time, Taiwan was still part of Fujian province, and the one on the left side gives you the year. But this is honoring a Gongxiang degree holder. This, again, is another imperial plaque awarded, but not to a degree holder. This says Wu Dai Tung Tang, 5 generations living together. And this, again, is a Qing dynasty plaque, and it was awarded by the county magistrate to every family in his county who managed to stay together for 5 generations, thereby fulfilling a key emanation of Confucian ethics and filiality. So, you know, the imperial state was there, but the interesting thing is that this award is not only imperial state values, it is in total resonance with local values as well. Okay, service association. Now, I'm going to go through this, well, all right. We have, they were moving out of the elite category. We're in a different category, and even on the elite, as I repeat, the elite literati associations, I really shouldn't call them that because they were associations for the literati as an interest group, but on the other hand, they were immersed in a sea of commoners, and most of the shareholders were not literati, most of the shareholders were commoners. Anyway, here is the Night Watch Association for village patrols. Then below that you have the Bridge Association, and the Bridge Association, there are at least 5 of them. A Bridge Association is a landed association who uses its funds to maintain bridges. By the way, all of these associations have religious foci as well, so that there's a tutelary deity for each bridge. Ferry associations, three of them. Elders associations, these are funeral associations, and there are at least 7 of them. Okay, now, moving into the cosmos as was conceived then, we start with the Pantheon in heaven. Now, there are a lot of them here. The representation is intense, but it is this very intensity which is the point. This very intensity, it shows, if you put them all together, it shows to what extent people were engaged with this whole cosmic image that they had. All right, on top here is Guanyin, the goddess of mercy. Kanon in Japanese. Underneath is Tiangong, the Lord of Heaven, that is the Jade Emperor, the top deity in the Chinese conception of the cosmos. And under, the next one I have then is Xuantian Shangdi, the Supreme Lord of Dark Heavens, a major god under the Jade Emperor. All these gods are in heaven. You have heaven on top, earth in the middle, and the underworld under there. And all 3 levels are filled with deities. So I'm not going to give them all of you, only the ones that are in associations. Okay, now, going down you have Sangguan Dadi, 3 great rulers. These are the controller of heaven, who is only outranked by the Jade Emperor, the controller of earth, who judges humanity, and Shui Guan, the ruler of water, who controls floods and pestilence. Going down, the next one is a very important goddess, Mazu, or Tinhao, or Tianhou, the goddess of heaven. There were 8 Mazu associations in this area, so you can see how important it was. Next, I'm still in the heaven. The Grand Lunar Association focused on the moon god. The Great Solar Association, sun god. Guandi, or Guangong, dedicated another very famous, very important god. You'll often go even here, and if you go to a Chinese restaurant, you see this fierce god, usually in a corner somewhere. That is Guandi. He is the god of the military, the god of commerce, and much more. He was the god of the military side of the bureaucracy. He was also the god of secret societies, and you name it. Now, Sanchang Guowang is the next one, and this is a more local god, very popular among the Hakka on the mainland and in Taiwan. The next one is more in the south of China than in the north, the Wuxian Association. 5 manifestations, the god of the 5 manifestations, 5 protective deities. And finally, the Great Qing Association. These are all, many of them are protective deities. Still more, The Gongxiang Association. This god was people prayed to this god when they were crossing the Taiwan Straits, which was very dangerous in those days. And then the Fasher Gonghui, a major Taoist god, linked to 3 Taoist worthies, as indicated below. I'll skip them. And then a Shenju Association, a powerful god who caused a plague among Aborigines who stole his image. This is Taiwan again. This is a local experience. All right. Zhu Shigong. This is a very famous god in southern and central China, protective again. And this is the Changong, another protective god. All right. The Jiang Junhui. This is interesting because this is more a local orientation. This general is a god who came to the aid of local Hakka when fighting Hokkien and Aborigines. And usually these gods appear in a flash of thunder, and things happen, and the enemy flees in terror. Okay. And so linked to this is now we're getting into local history. The De Shang Hui is virtuous victory is a play on to obtain victory. The da and da. The association supported rites at the virtuous victory altar in commemoration of a god who facilitated yet another Minong victory, this time against enemy forces linked to the Lin Shui Wen uprising. And that was about 1780s. Remember that you're dealing with a community which is both a community and also has one aspect of a militia. And the Jufuren Hui is a local goddess, again, who aided the Minong Hakka in one of their many battles. Now we move from heaven to earth. The Chenghuang, this is interesting. Chenghuang is the city god, so-called city god. And Minong is hardly a city. Chenghuang temples are not in place in the countryside. So what is the Chenghuang Association doing in Minong? Well, in fact, the city god, apropos of local state connections, the city god is not in charge of only a city. The city is the administrative center of a district. And the city god is in charge of the entire district. He's based in the city. His temple is in the city, just like the living magistrate is based in the city. But in fact, he's in charge of it. And one of his jobs is to dispatch the dead to the underworld. So people have good reason for praying to Chenghuang. Then we have earth god associations, numerous earth god associations, but every neighborhood has its own earth god, and you have hierarchies of earth gods. So you'll have, let's say you have a neighborhood has a village has 4 neighborhoods. Each neighborhood will have an earth god, then there'll be a village earth god, and up and up down the line. So it's not surprising that you have about 25 different ones. Remember, I want to remind you again, every association I'm talking about here is landed, has an account book, has shareholders, is a discrete corporate entity which meets at least once a year. The Shaguan Association, for a local god who protects especially against flooding. Shrine placed near waterways, 3 of them. Then the Stone Mother Association. There was a rock formation looking like the shape of a woman, and she was widely worshipped by people with sick children or following an unexpected misfortune. All right, we're now moving into the underworld of the dead. Okay, this is the Yo-Ying Association, devoted to collecting the bones of and worshiping the unworshipped dead. The unworshipped dead, worshiping the unworshipped dead was considered to be an extraordinarily virtuous act. What do I mean by worshiping the unworshipped dead? These are people who died without descendants, with no descendants to worship them. So they become ghosts unless they are worshipped and placated and given some kind of support. And for example, the second one is called Gu Junzi, the isolated prince, which is a nice way of talking about a ghost, all right? And a term for the abandoned dead. Again, the Gu Hun, the isolated souls. For the unworshipped dead, they sponsor a salvation ritual on the 15th of the 7th lunar month. And then there is, below there, the Pudu Endowment Association. They do sponsor a salvation ritual. Okay, now, I'm showing you some more slides. I didn't want to show too many because we would never finish, but this is worshiping the unworshipped dead in Minong in 1964. And you can see this tomb. Inside both of those chambers are bones. Bones collected from the outside where it appears that no one has been worshiping the graves. In this particular case, in Minong, some of the bones were those of Japanese soldiers killed during World War II. In Minong, there was a big Japanese base, and starting in 1944, as the Japanese radio says, all goes well on the southern front, American planes came screaming in and began bombing the base, so creating many casualties. Now, this gentleman there is looking at them, and here he is reading a prayer. By the way, once that, as you did, this is a very standard procedure. Once the prayer is finished, once you finish reading the prayer, you burn it. And those two Chinese characters, the big ones there behind the incense, mean a virtuous cemetery. So he's reading them. Now, this gentleman reading, his name is Zhong Cai-yong. This gentleman reading the prayer was considered to be a holy man. He was considered to be a li shang, a ritual master, which is somebody who knows the whole scene. You have Taoist priests, you have Buddhist priests, and they do their own thing. The ritual master basically controls the local cosmos with all its complexity. In any event, this man was so important and so holy that after he passed away, he is now a god in a local temple there. All right, seasonal festivals. Again, there's very little of these associations don't latch onto, as you can begin to see. We have the Yuanxiao Association, which is the which is the Lantern Festival. Then you have something called the Old Lantern Festival Association. Then you have the Associated Cold Food Festival, which is the day before Qing, which is, as many of you know, a very important occasion, offerings to the dead. Then you have Qing itself, 3 associations, Mid-Autumn Festival, and finally, the End of the Month Association. All right, just a couple of concluding slides to help you conceptualize this. As you know, Taiwan came under Japanese occupation, and here you have a photograph taken in Meinong in 1919 of a temple celebration in Meinong with a heavy Japanese presence. You can see the Japanese officers sitting at the tables there. They're Japanese police. And this, but the Chinese, the Chinese inscription says Ji Wei Nian Jian Da Jiao. A jiao was a massive celebration of cosmic renewal in which Taoist priests were invited, usually with long processions and so forth. So it's not surprising that you had a heavy concentration of Japanese police involved. And they're being treated, but they are being feted by the local community there. All right, now this is one of my first field work. This is the way, this is shots of a village in 1964. You'll see things have changed since then. There's that old lady there. In 1964, there were still people around, and she was one of them who lived in Qing and who could talk about Qing. And she, in fact, is still wearing her Qing clothing, Qing dynasty clothing. Most women over 60 at that point still wore it. All right, and this is a compound. This was the standard way it's a standard form of residential forms even during the Qing dynasty, except usually it was not the material was wattle and daub and thatched roofs in many cases. But be that as it may, in the center of the compound you have the ancestral hall, and the wings are residences. And as the compound can expand and expand and expand, and even though the families may divide and form new families, they still stay there, so you can get a larger and larger group. So ultimately, through time, it goes from being a family compound into being a kind of a lineage compound. Okay. And this, again, is a village scene in '64. This is the village now. You can see how things have changed a bit. These are scenes now. And I think that the final slide I'm going to show indicates perhaps that the cosmological orientation that we have been looking at has some rather severe threats. So here's your 7-Eleven, which is right in the village, and you can see everything is all very snappy and new. So time is running out, but I just want to make a couple of concluding remarks. In terms of what are these associations that I'm trying to stress are but one part of a much larger picture. Even in terms of associations, I only talked about half of them. But it's of a much larger picture. But the whole picture is of people through this cultural medium extraordinarily engagé, if you will, with a very big environment. It was there in their heads. They knew they were in China. They knew they were in China. The ancestral associations I haven't dealt with, in fact, have to draw a map of China in order to make a genealogical map and say the first ancestor was in northern China and they came down this way. So that you get this constant mapping, this constant locating, this constant placement of yourself within this larger framework. And so if one thinks about that as a cultural legacy, and as I said earlier, the Imperial Chinese state fitted into it. Well, what happened in China, of course, with the collapse of the imperial system, was that there was this kind of total cosmological framework just fell apart. It just fell apart. Parts of it survived, but as partial representations. They no longer have the kind of cultural significance that they used to have. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that when we talk about, for example, the emergence of Chinese nationalism, the re-emergence of strong Chinese nationalism, we're talking about Chinese nationalism or Han nationalism. It's a very interesting question. The point being is that as far as the Han Chinese are concerned, there is this legacy of unity, there is this legacy of national identity, and one of the implications of the British, starting with the British victory in the Opium War, was precisely the fact that this represented a challenge to the whole cosmic picture. They shouldn't be winning. They shouldn't be there. It's wrong. It just messes things up. And it was a disaster. It was a cultural disaster as well as a socio-political one. There is this kind of a traditional form of national identity, and how it relates to today is problematic. I think that in terms of helping, the notion of being Han Chinese, I think, is deeply embedded in this. And in that sense, it's still very, very strong. If we go back to the Taiwan mainland contrast, the fact is that they share a legacy, but that legacy is not enough, frankly, to maintain the kind of a unity that history so far has decreed should move in other directions. So time will tell. But I do not think that you can ever look at China and just look at the present and not take into consideration some of these rather massive cultural legacies that seem to often enough get lost in the conversation. Thank you. I think we have, yeah.
A few minutes.
A few minutes, okay. Okay.
Myron, you said the initial migration was Hakka. So are there any distinctively Hakka cultural relics and remnants here in Maynooth?
Well, in Maynooth it was Hakka, correct. In other parts of Taiwan it wasn't. There are some cultural, well, you saw some relics. I showed you some relics. But if you mean in terms of behavior and culture, not in terms of physical.
Well, the spoken dialect is different from Mandarin, so I'm wondering if there were Hakka cultural institutions of any kind.
Oh, yeah, there were Hakka cultural institutions, but they were cultural institutions run by Hakka, not Hakka cultural institutions, okay? When you're studying for the Chinese examination system, you don't worry about being a Hakka. Okay, about that, and so that's very interesting because it's really circumstantial. Let's put it this way. In Maynooth, and that whole Hakka militia I talked about, they were Qing loyalists. They said, long live the Qing, da Qing one way, and they were charged. In mainland China, you had another Hakka region, which in fact generated the Taiping Rebellion. They're hardly Qing loyalists. And between the Taipings in Guangxi and the Taiwan Hakkas in Taiwan, in the middle you have, at roughly the same period, these fierce, what was it called? These fierce Hakka Punti wars in central Guangdong, in which they were neither pro-Qing or anti-Qing, they were just at each other's throats. So you get a whole variety of political profiles here, and none of them can be rooted in any particular ethnic characteristic. As far as cultural factors, yes, there's some. For example, they have their famous mountain songs. The prevalence of foot binding was practically non-existent among the Hakka. And one can mention others, but the point is, here's the important point, in fact, which I think is one of the geniuses of the Qing Imperium. If you're Han Chinese, you have to have a local characteristic. You have to be Shanghainese, or you have to be Hakka, or you have to be from somewhere. There's no such thing as a generic Han Chinese. That means that cultural differences on the map basically map your participation in the greater Han Chinese cultural sphere. Precisely by, in other words, there's a whole history of special products, Tucha. Every place is known for its special products. These special products do not make you an alien, remote factor. Rather, they confirm that you're part of China. And this is the twist that happens. So in Taiwan, you had these big feuds between the Hakka and the Hokkien, and the officials were upset by this because they said your differences should be taken as placement on the. But they didn't say those words, but they said in effect these differences should put you on the map of China, not put you at each other's throats. And this kind of, there was a very famous guy named Lam Dingyuan, who was one of the big top officials who came over with the Qing as soon as they conquered the island. And he wrote this big story saying, why don't you people think of yourselves as members of a certain county in Taiwan, of a certain prefecture in Taiwan? What are you doing calling yourselves Hakka or Tranzhou or Zhangzhou? Stop this nonsense and get back into the administrative mode. Well, that didn't work. But the point is that when you start asking about special characteristics, it's a very interesting issue in China, how you deal with them. Yeah. Any other hand? Yes?
Is there any indication that these religious associations and traditions are being adapted in the modern world? And I ask that based on the experience of a Japanese civil engineer who died in 1924, who is now venerated in the local community in Tainan on an annual basis. And that is also associated with kind of Taiwanese independence, political affiliations as well.
Okay, first of all, to be explicitly, a few still survive, actually, some of the associations. I was desperately looking for some old slides of an association meeting. I couldn't find it in time, so there it is. But a few, very few. The Japanese registered them, as you can see, but they tried to get them to dissolve. Many did, but they did force them to. They sort of nudged them, but many did and many didn't. Then with the land reform put on by the nationalists, a lot of that land was reallocated. But somehow some of them survived. I think that the broader picture is that if you go to temples in Taiwan or in China for that matter, as with these associations, there are many gods. And there's a big distinction to be made here between certain kinds of religious groupings that you either belong to it or you don't, okay? And there are many salvationistic sects in China and Taiwan, traditionally and today, in which if you're a believer, that's it. You're in that group. You're not believing in something else. But what we're talking now is that the focus of belief is in the inherent sanctity of the total lived environment. That's what's holy. It's that whole lived environment is what's holy, and therefore everything in it, or anything in it, can be an object of particular devotion within this broader context. And you can go to 5 temples if you want to, or you can belong to 10 associations. If that answers your question. Yes.
It seems for me that almost all of those associations are organized for religious or economic purpose. Is that clear for you?
I can't hear you. What did you say?
I mean, it seems for me that most of those associations are organized for religious or economic purpose. So are there any other associations that have some political function?
Well, first of all, it's not religious or economic, it's religious and economic. They completely, every one of those associations, the association subculture, if I may say that, consists of account books, managers' reports, an annual manager's report, a banquet, and I should have mentioned, and very often dividends are distributed, as a matter of fact. Are there associations for political purposes?
Yes.
Yeah, they were, but they wouldn't take this kind of a form. They wouldn't take this kind of being rooted in the community. They took other forms, meetings and what have you. There were all sorts of, I'm going to talk about a shared worldview. If you didn't share that worldview, you'd be noticed. For example, one major distinction to be made in terms of the Imperial period as far as religion is concerned and its connection with politics, is the distinction between this worldly, in terms of this cosmos, religion, and salvationism. Salvationism was considered heterodox, because you're denying the very cosmos that I spent the whole afternoon talking about. And the focus is on, in most cases, Western heaven, the paradise, the paradise, the Buddhist paradise of Western heaven, Jilagwa. If you do that on a low profile, as you're approaching the end of your life, you want to think about yourself, that's okay. If you start organizing prayer societies, preaching the upcoming end of the cosmos, as the White Lotus religion did, if you start doing that, you are basically telling the whole state ideology of cosmic reproduction, cosmic order, to go to hell. And probably in most cases, it wouldn't be those that went to hell, but the people preaching that. That's the way the system works. Okay, yes.
Yeah, you spoke of a subset of associations with the literary focus.
Right.
And that those were equally socially inclusive. So I was wondering, beyond maybe collecting shares and distributing dividends, whether we know anything about particular activities that transpired under their auspices.
Okay. First of all, good question. Most associations, interesting, didn't have any particular, except maybe once a year. They didn't do anything except, and there the economic element might be predominant, but the literary association, there were lots of literary associations which were not linked to this at all. In other words, the degree holders, there are poetry associations, the degree holders, there are enough degree holders to make for a difference. But the larger activities would not be restricted to shareholders in association. They would involve people of common interest. It would turn, if you have about 5 or 6 degree holders, the chances are they'd all be belonging to the same associations. But they're not meeting as members of those associations, they're meeting as a group of degree holders. The associational structure itself was restricted precisely to shareholders, and the regulations will say, you strangers, if you're not a shareholder, you can't come, you can't join the dinner, you can't join the banquet, and and some say you can bring family members, others say you can't bring family members, whatever. But the point is, I'm not saying that these associations were a template for a daily social life. I am saying that these associations represent a particular manifestation of the way people organize themselves. But among ordinary when you had weddings, you had funerals, these are major social events in which lots of people come, and the associational membership is not an issue. So to answer your question, I think that it's not so much that the association generated activity among the literati, rather it's that the literati generated the associations. It's slightly different. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Let me return to the podium and encourage you to join me in thanking Professor Cohen for an excellent presentation.